start with a motivating example. Okay? Let's say that you're a 4-year-old and you're trying to learn to build. Okay? And the first thing that you're going to try to organize is to recognize it. Okay? And I'm not telling that this is the way they teach students now in the school, because running somebody with a pedagogical degree is going to kill them, right? But just go with me for a second, okay? So a teacher is going to show you different type of manuscript A, computer A, and it's going to tell you that that's it. And from time to time, you're going to be seeing many of these problems, and you're going to recognize this category, as well as T's and C's and so on and so on. Okay? So in a way, somebody is telling you what is on it. Okay? Somebody, most of the time they're not telling you in an explicit way, they're just reading books to you and making the sound. Okay? But there is somebody that is transferring that knowledge. This is the typical problem that we call pattern recognition. Okay? We try to recognize a pattern in the data that we see. The other problem that you're trying to recognize is something that it doesn't need to be an explicit teaching. You have to find novelty detection and normalities, things that are different in the data that you're seeing. So let's say that they give you these 4 words. Which is the odd one? That one, isn't it? Second one? The first, the other 3 are car makers, that's our bike maker. Yes? Okay, the coffee here is not very good, but that's not my fault. Okay? Okay, so that, I didn't tell you anything, I'm trying you to find the odd one. Okay? In this case, there's no specific feature, but you need to assume something. You need to assume either prior knowledge or some characteristic that you want to know about. The other one is that this problem can be ambiguous. And this one is, if you look at it, probably mostly you are too young to recognize these names. I used this example first almost 10 years ago. I was teaching it. And this one makes a lot of sense at that time. I didn't need to explain anything to the students. Okay. Now I have to go and spell it out for you, which is, probably you know what vector is. Okay. Pattern is a Formula 1 run. Okay. Owen, that's not true. He used to be a forward, a British forward, very good, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Raul, the same thing. Okay? Also a forward player in Real Madrid. The thing is, when you look at this thing, depending on what your context is, the odd one out is a different. Okay? The easy one out is, okay, Owen is out because it's blue at the other end. Okay? Then you could say, Raul is out because these 3 guys are British, or these guys. Okay? The other one that you could say, this guy is a Formula 1 driver, and these 3 are soccer players. Okay. So in this case, context is everything. You need to give the proper context in order to find the novelty detection that you're looking for. If you don't have the proper context, and you use your novelty algorithm, your novelty detection algorithm, blindly, you may return things that are garbage, or things that don't make sense. So you're trying to learn with an explicit teaching, without an explicit output, but you need to know what you're doing. And then you have to provide it in. So in general, what for me machine learning is learning from samples. That's what we do. We have gathered samples, and we need to know what that sample is. Our typical assumption is that these samples are coming from a PLC that is independently distributed and identically distributed. You all know that we have to relax those conditions. In some cases, the independent assumption sometimes is not So fulfill, sometimes they are not identically distributed. But for analyzing all our algorithms, this would be our starting point. And the important thing is, given this set of samples, we want to know something about this. We could want to know what is the structure of this. Okay. That's the general problem of how we go from samples to PFC. But sometimes we might be interested in something very simple. Maybe one of these variables is a 0 or 1, and we want to predict if it's a 0. Or maybe one of these output we believe is a function of all the others, and we want to create and find that and estimate that. Okay. So is this inductive process always possible? Okay. What are the conditions for this inductive process to be possible? And the idea there basically, learning theory tells us when these things will work. One thing that is important is this is that we need to deal with uncertainty. This is not a deterministic problem. We are not looking for relations that are one-on-one. They're always gonna be there. If you have a deterministic relation, that's an easy problem. And if it's interesting, it has already been solved, and if it's not interesting, it's not interesting. Okay. You need to deal with uncertainty. There are gonna be things that are gonna be random, and there's gonna be noise, and there's gonna be errors, and there's gonna be tons of things in real data that you need to do, and that you need to expect and expect. Okay? This is not generating Gaussians in your mind. This is, you have to think that you are generating real data, that you're going to be dealing with real data, and real data brings many uncertainties. And also, as I said in the previous example, there is no correct answer. We need to interpret the data. We need to learn from the data. And in the case of supervised learning, that we will talk about in a second, there is always one target value that you want. And this is why the approaches in supervised learning are much easier to communicate to others. Okay? You create a new supervised learning algorithm, it does something that it wasn't doing previously, it does it better, you get a smaller learning. Okay. But in the novelty detection problem, there is not always a correct answer. You need to give an interpretation to your results. And that is where the machine learning is coming from. The machine learning is simplifying the complexity of the data, the dimensionality of the data in a way that a human can understand. Okay? And in this case, prior knowledge is really, really important. You need to encode in your algorithms all the prior knowledge that you have. And I don't mean this only in a base sample. Okay? I mean it as a scientist. Whatever information you have that you know that this data has to fulfill, it will limit the things that your algorithm can do, and hence it will work better, faster, with less data. And that's the whole point of encoding whatever prior knowledge you have into your algorithm. Okay. Our objective is fairly simple. We have data, and now there is a system for encoding. So when I started my PhD 20 years ago, there was no data there. Okay. So basically we had 20 databases that everybody used over and over again. Okay. A good friend of mine, Andrea said, he works for Google now. He used to say, it was early 2000, 2001, that the algorithms that we had at that time are overfitted to the available data. We were very good at Boston housing, and we were very good at MLSS. Okay, but that's basically the type of data that everybody was using over and over. Okay, now things are completely different. Okay, you have tons of data. You have tons of data from many different problems. So it's actually, you don't want to replicate your experiments with other people's data, but you want to say, hey, I have this new cool database that is coming from this cool new problem, and I'm able to solve it this way. So for me, that is much more exciting than what we were doing before. Okay? Because actually, you can go and solve the problems that you want to solve. Okay? Machine learning is just a tool to solve those problems. 15 years ago, we were just solving over and over again problems that were not interested in. Okay. You will see it when Neil Lawrence comes and talk about unsupervised learning reduction process. He will put the example with the Swiss code, and then they say, but this is just an example. This is just to illustrate what we can do. The Swiss code is not important. But some people take it as, oh, I need to solve one of the Swiss code. Forget about the Swiss code. This is just allows me to illustrate my own model. So synthetic data and all these very well-known databases are good to illustrate what you're doing. And you have to remember that you want to solve a different problem, something completely new that nobody has really attempted. And this is the age that we are now. I think that's make it much more interesting to be in this field now than when I started. Okay. There's going to be, as I said before, things are going to be noisy. You have complex and nonlinear interactions. You may have variables or variables that are not even relevant, and you might have incomplete data. All those things are going to happen to you, and you have to be ready to deal with all of those things. Okay? There is a quote, I think it was from Henry, it's a statistician in Oxford, that basically says, and I'm not sure if this is quote, this is what the Boston here is. Do not fall in love with models, fall in love with data. Okay? That happened from some of us from time to time. You say, oh, I have this very cool model, and you try, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work. And you say, the problem is in the data. Okay? The problem is with the model. There is something in your model that is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Okay? So you have to follow where the data is taking you, and that might require changing the model. Okay? Do change the model. Okay? Applications, I'm not even going to go into this. Right now, there is so much data out there. You pick whatever you want. Do that. Good. Okay. Basically, this is just formalizing the type of things that I've been talking about before. Okay. So the type of learning that we're going to be seeing throughout a summer school is supervised learning. So you're going to see Neil Lawrence and John Shelton's. They're going to be talking about supervised learning. Who else is going to be talking about supervised learning? Oh, and Francisco Martinez is also going to be talking about supervised learning. The idea here is this rotation. This is where most people start with machine learning, okay? Because it's the easiest to understand. Okay. Let's go to the MLSS database. We give you tons of pictures of digits and the labels of it. And I tell you, build me a machine that is able to, from a new picture that it hasn't seen before, give you the truth. The goal is easy, it's clear to understand, and it's complicated because we're working with a 700 dimensional space. That's the goal of this problem. How did you solve it? Okay. The goal of supervised learning. You already know what you want. Okay. That's basically what John Lincoln did in the 80s with the MLSS database. They wanted to have an algorithm to detect zip codes in the US letters automatically. So you could read the zip code and know where to send it. That's the idea of any mix. The issue is sometimes you know these things. And sometimes you know this thing is somebody comes to you with, okay, this is my problem, I want you to solve it. Okay. So and I don't know if this is the way that it happened, but the post office says, I want to recognize digits in a zip codes in an automatic way. How can I do that? And you go and you build a machine and say, hey, this machine is doing 99% of correct values. There you go. Implement it, and then you saw the letters we have. The other problem is unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning is, okay, you have this data collection. Okay? And this data collection can be anything. For example, you may be observing the sky. You have a telescope looking into the sky. And you're looking for abnormalities that you see in the sky. But you don't know what these abnormalities are. You want an algorithm that allows you to, okay, of all this past data we're getting out of the sky, of all these telescopes that I'm looking at, where are the things that are weird? And why are these things weird or different? Once you get that, from that information you're gonna say, okay, now I need to explore on that specific area, and I need to look with my knowledge on astronomy to be able to recognize what is going on. Okay? In a way, you can see that this is the way that we found exoplanets. Okay? It's just by looking. But looking at the data and recognizing that there were some patterns that were different than we were expected, we were able to say, hey, this has to be something. And that's the way that the signature of the exoplanets always comes. Now we know what the signature is, and I may be able to do a supervised learning algorithm that finds them. So finding the first one was hard. The last time that I heard, somebody says, we have found another 2,000. So you don't report now one by one, but you report 2,000 by 2,000. And the next thing is, which are the ones that are far enough from this, in the area from their sun to have water and oxygen. And they have it. Okay. Because right now, most of the exoplanets that we found are Jupiter size. And too far from this. Again, as I said before, I'm not going to make a fool of myself talking about astronomy. Okay? But finale will talk about this topic. Okay. So I think you're going to enjoy the talk because it's very good. For the supervised learning, Neil Lawrence is going to talk a little bit about it. Jeanette Williamson is going to be talking a little bit about it. Well, but it's probably most of it about it. Okay. So let me go to talk a little bit about what supervised learning is, although all of you know about this. So the first thing is that now that C that we had before, it has become a total. So X is going to be my input, and Y is going to be my output. And my approach is actually, I want to predict Y given X. Okay. And there are three possibilities that you can do this. You can model the joint, you can model the conditional, or you can just look for a function. Okay. The first thing that I'm going to say is, if you really want to predict X given Y, this is useless. There is no information, so because you're going to give him an X, and from that X you have to predict Y. So what is the property? Why do I want to model X when I'm going to be given an X? Okay. So if you go this way, you're making your problem much harder than it needs to be. Okay. Just think that X is again the name in this database. So X is 700 dimension, Y is only one dimension. Do you want to model a distribution that is 700 something dimension, or something that is only one dimension, or get just one? Okay. So doing this is much harder. If we do this, it's because we are not only interested in doing this. We want to know something about next. Okay. So I'm not telling you not to do it. Don't kid yourself with what you're doing. So knowing about the model about X is important. It might give you more information, but it's useless to predict Y. Okay. The two approaches here, and it's basically, if I'm only interested in predicting Y, I should just go for a function that gives me the best value. If I want to know some uncertainty about Y, probably the best way to predict that is with this condition. It's not the same thing that I know that Y is a 1 with a 50% chance and something else with another 50% chance. That is a 1 with a 99% chance. that might give you different information. Okay? Maybe for the zip codes it's not that important. Okay? But maybe if you are doing a medical test, you can imagine that it's not the same thing as telling somebody that has cancer, or that I'm pretty sure that you have cancer. Okay? Or if you go into finance, basically you want to know the probability that something is going to happen in the future. If you're really investing in markets and you're doing high frequency trading, you need to know the distribution, knowing up or down distribution. Okay. So the classical way of solving this problem of classification or regression, and we refer to classification when y is discrete, and we talk about regression when y is continuous, is hypothesis testing. Okay? Either doing detection or estimation. And there is tons of classic literature, and basically they have to say that the best thing that we can do is optimize the risk. Okay? So you define a cost function. How much do you pay for getting it wrong? You integrate over your distribution, and you get the best function. That's the classic detection and estimation theory that most of you have heard of. Okay. If you have this thing, this problem might be complicated to solve, but you just solve it in integral. Okay. What happens when we don't know this? And we don't. What happens when we don't know this probability density model, and the only that they have is these samples getting from Perez? What can we do? Okay. So given that you have all this literature on how to solve this problem, and then you have these samples, well, why don't I just estimate this distribution, put it here, and solve it the same? Okay? We can use all the machinery that we have in detection and estimation, and your problem is solved. Is it the end of the story? The answer is no. And I also gave you the answer before. I told you that out of the three approaches, you never should do attempt this one. And this is the one that I just did. Okay? So, knowing all this literature that require this, and I have the data, then I went and estimated this. Okay. But the only thing that I want to know if this is zero. Not what is the density distribution of all the ones that it could somebody have brought wrong in the okay. So the issue of estimating this probability density is that if you don't have information about it, it's very complicated. While actually finding the one or the twos or the zeros is very easy. Okay. So this approach that a lot of people look into it in order to go from the detection and estimation into machine learning is completely wrong. Okay. Detection and estimation makes a lot of sense if you know the probability density. But if what you have is data, you should never attempt it unless you really want to have this distribution. Okay. You say, I need this distribution, then you need to find that distribution. But you don't need to do it because you're getting better errors. You are doing it because you want the distribution. So it's good to know what one wants before going into it. Okay. So what we actually do is the following, which is, if this is a minimum risk, we go and compute empirical risk. You could say that implicitly, this empirical risk is coming from this probability density model. You plug in this probability density model with a delta function in this P of x. Okay. But if this is going to converge to the true solution, is not because this compares to the true probability, because that will never come. Here, the only thing that you're doing is memorizing the data. This is just a table that memorizes the data. There is no learning. So now, one of the things that we want to know is, if I minimize this, what do I need to know? Okay. And the important thing here is just this L function that measures the errors that we were talking about is still the same one. How much do I pay for getting it wrong? That's the loss function that you usually have. But if you think I have changed something here, before I was just looking for the first function for any potential function. And now I limited my search to a spade of function f. And that's the key aspect of the things that we do when we do machine learning. You're not optimizing over the whole space, but you're using your prior knowledge to limit f. Either if you're Bayesian or you're not Bayesian, frequentist. What you do is, I'm not going to optimize over all my potential functions, because that will lead to overfitting. We will go into overfitting in a slide. We just want to do unlimited search in a space where we know that the true solution lies, and that we have enough data in order to find that true solution. So, is this always a good answer? It actually depends on what function space. What is your prior knowledge that you have encoded in this F function? And this is the whole point when we're doing machine learning. We have to have the two things. We have the data that we have to reflect as truthfully as possible, but we also know that we need to control the complexity some way, so we don't get solutions that are completely ridiculous. And this is the whole, every time that you're doing machine learning, those are the kind of things that you do. Okay. Your model is a model over F. Okay. And then you apply your data to it, and you're able to explain something. The more restrictions that you put that make sense, makes you learn faster and with this data. And that's what you do better. Okay? My impression is, if we had infinite computational power and we have infinite data, you can do things very stupid and still get to the right solution. Okay? What we want to do is get to that solution not in infinite time by the next leap step. That's the whole issue. And our model is basically modeling. I've talked about overfitting before, and that's basically what the whole issue that we do in machine learning is. We have this data that we need to represent, and we have this function space in which we are trying to look for the solution. If that function is very general, then you could explain any data anyway, and what you end up doing is doing this. You memorize your data. Okay. So overfitting, the simplest way of overfitting is a table. You recognize all the data that you see in your table, and new data comes in, is in my table, and you know what the solution is. It's not in my table, I throw it away, I don't know what it is. That's a model, that's a function. The stupidest model that you can think of. And that's the model that even having infinite data is not going to work. Okay? We, from time to time, some of us end up having one of these models that learns everything and just memorize it. Okay? So, the objective is, this has to be complex enough to learn the interaction that is in the data. It has to be simple enough not to memorize it. And that's the whole thing that we're going to see over and over these 2 days. How are the different models in which you can do? Okay. The standard solution to overfitting is either the reduced complexity algorithm. That's basically what learning theory tells you. The structural risk minimization principle that, I mean, I don't know if we will have we will be able to talk about it. The idea basically is I construct this function space f as a nest set of functions. So first I say I'm going to use linear classifiers, then I'm going to use quadratic classifiers, then I'm going to use cubic classifiers, and I go expanding my function until I get a good trade-off into the error that I'm getting and the complexity of the function. Okay? And that's basically what the BC, the Laplace theory was. The other option is regularization and a penalty. Okay? And that's basically the approach that you're going to see in most of the cases. In Bayesian statistics, the prior that you're putting is a regularizer. Okay? I'm not going to tell you that, but that's basically it. Okay? The other way is control the capacity. Okay. And the last one is add your prior knowledge. The things that they shouldn't be there, or things that you know that shouldn't happen, try to add it within. Okay. The only thing that I wanted to add here is in regularization. The idea basically is that we have empirical risk and we have a regularizer that controls our complexity. And the objective is minimize, instead of the empirical risk, minimize the regularizer risk, which controls how much your solution deviates or is going into the other thing. Okay, and this. And almost I covered this already. Okay. In the first few slides, I've been talking about getting the best Y directly. So my only objective is to minimize this loss that I was talking to you about. I haven't explicitly talked about the loss. I assume that most of you know what I was talking about, which is basically, if you're talking about a classification problem, is what is the penalty for getting it wrong? If you're talking about a regression problem, is what is the penalty once you're further away from the true decision? Okay. Sometimes you don't want to get it, minimize that loss, but you want to know how good your prediction. Okay? If you're talking about a classification problem, is what is the probability of that thing happening, of all the potential outputs happening. Okay? So instead of in the MNIST database, I can give you an image and you could say, I believe this is a 1. Or you can have this approach, and you can say, I believe that is a 1 30% of the time, with 30% probability, a 7 with 20% probability, a 2 with 15, and so on and so forth. Okay. And that might give you more information. So for example, if you have to take a decision, the decision is not going to end up going, this is a 1. But if that decision is going up the stream to a process, let's say that you're using, instead of this is for the MNIST database, you're using that process for letters. So a classifier is telling you which letter is which. And instead of sending the letter that you think is most probable, you send a list of probability for all the letters. Because you know that on top of that you're going to put a dictionary, and on top of that you're going to put a grammar. That is going to be able to correct some of the others. So if you tell them, okay, this is the probability over each one of the letters, you will have an easier time correcting the mistakes than you will. Okay? This information is very, very important in medical, financial, and telecommunications. And you will see that basically in the last lecture that I'm going to be going through 2 obligations, why we need to do this. With this part, I finished the introduction of the standard models. The other thing that I wanted to go through is a simple a very plain vanilla introduction to Bayesian learning. Okay. So the approach that I was using in the previous slide is more based on frequencies learning and learning theory, in which you assume that from one side you have your data, and then you're trying to build a function that has some parameters. Okay? And the parameters might be unknown to you, but they are not a random variable. So you tend to find those parameters from the, and you might be able to give confidence intervals over them. You might be able to know what are the different configurations that you have. Bayesian learning, what it does is, these parameters are unknown. I'm going to treat them as a random variable. If I treat them as a variable and as a random variable, they are just as data that I have. It's something that I don't understand. And I can use all my machinery in order to treat data and parameters the same. Okay. The people that like the Bayesian statistic, it says treating everything the same way allows me to do some inference and be more positive about the inference that I do. The major criticism is that when you suddenly say that your parameters are random variables, you have to put a prior on top of it. And your prior is something that you really made up. Okay? It's something that it doesn't have to have anything to do with the probability model over that data. It's just something that you have to make up. And if your prior has an influence in your solution, it might be pointing into the wrong directions. Okay. With that, I'm not going either way. As I said at the beginning, I want to solve problems. So if the mean Bayesian allows me to solve the problem better, I'm going to be Bayesian. And if mean frequencies allow to solve the problem better, I'm going to be frequencies. Okay. Some people might take this as, okay, I have no principle. Yes, I know. Okay. My principle, as I said before, I don't want to fall in love with a model. I want to fall in love with a data. Okay. So the model for me is just an argument to get to the solution that I'm looking at. Okay. So now, what I'm going to try to say is, like I've been criticizing a little bit Bayesian statistics in the previous one, I'm going to do different here. I'm going to give you why Bayesian statistics is good. Okay. I'm going to use a very, very simplistic model, because some of you might not be familiarized with that, and I want you to start doing this, to familiarize you with Bayesian modeling. Because Neil Lawrence is going to start from that one, and Shinev is going to start from that one, and Dylan is going to start from that one. So I want you to understand what is the basic idea behind it, in case you didn't have that intuition. Okay. So Bayesian modeling basically comes from the idea of this Bayes rule. Bayes rule is a general rule of probability. Okay? So in a way, Bayes rule doesn't have anything about being Bayesian. Okay? It's just something that is true for any probability model. That I know that the conditional of y given x multiplied by the probability of x divided by the probability of y is the probability of x given. This rule becomes Bayesian learning when you start talking about these things not as two random variables, but when you say that y in general is your data and x are your parameters. Okay? So this rule that from the point of view of statistics is asymmetric, x and y are equally important, when people use it in Bayesian statistics, it becomes a rule that is asymmetric. and it's only talking about your parameters. Okay? So this function, that is, I just call it the conditional while given it, it suddenly becomes the likelihood of x. Okay? This function is, given the data that I have, how likely are each one of the values of x? Okay. And you have a model for that. This becomes, so this likelihood is basically telling you how well the parameters that you're using are fitting the data. P of x is the prior over your parameters. Okay. Here is where your model comes. Okay. What do you know about your parameters? So you can put a prior over x. Okay. And this function over here is what we call, given my likelihood, how well the data interprets the parameters, and my prior probability over the parameters, what is the posterior value over the parameters? Okay. So when we read this equation, it suddenly becomes an equation about x, about the parameters. Okay? This is the conditional of y given the parameters and the likelihood of the parameters. We always talk about the likelihood. The likelihood of x, the prior of x, the posterior of x. Okay? So, and that's the way that we make inference over that. This tells us how good we fit the data. This tells us where do we think our parameters should be. And this is the way. Okay? This is just a normalization concept. Okay? That normalization constant is called the evidence, and it's the evidence of the model. So it's evidence that you have set well with parameters. Okay? How do we use machine learning with the base rule? Okay. So let's say that we're going to do a regression program. Okay. So let's say that I'm giving a database with n entries, and I want to estimate y given x. But I'm going to simplify this very much. Okay. And I'm going to say, instead of saying that you have a full number, you have lots of functions to choose from, you can only choose these four. That's the way that we want to do it. And we want to compute the output for a new vector x star. How do we apply base rule in this case? Okay. So again, we have the likelihood of the data. Sorry. We have the likelihood of the models, of the HI. I have a prior over each one of the functions. And I'm going to compute the posterior for each one of the functions. Okay? And more importantly, I'm not interested in computing the posterior for the function. What I want to know is what is the y star that is coming from this x star. So once I have the posterior for my model, what I do is I integrate out the posterior of the model for the likelihood for the new position vector. Does that make sense? No?
In terms of notation, you
Yeah.
mean that the h1 of x equals y?
That's right, yes.
Oh, okay.
So these are just this is just general function. So this is y equal to h1, y equal to h2, y equal to h3, and y equals to h4. Okay. That's the only thing that I meant here. So basically, these are the four possible explanations of the data. Okay. So it's a very simple model because I'm not giving you a limited number of functions. I could give you an h that is a linear function, and I can tell you look for the linear parameters. That's an infinite set. I'm giving you only four functions. Okay? And this is the whole point, that the kind of things that you're going to be doing in Bayesian. You're going to first compute the posterior for your likelihood, and then you're going to integrate out your posterior to make predictions. These are the two steps that you're going to do. Okay? Now let me show you the So the idea here is, these are, so this is function 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I want to calculate the output at this point. What is the value of y at this point? And I have assumed that the 4 functions are equally probable. I don't have any other prior information, so I'm going to give them the same prior to each one of them. And I'm going to assume that the likelihood is a Gaussian distribution with some standard deviation. So being Bayesian and knowing that these are the 4 points that I have, this is going to be my prediction. Okay, my prediction is that probability density one. Okay? You have all this information. So right now I'm not telling you is this point, this point, this point, or this point. This is the probability here could be any of those points. Okay? The idea now is I'm going to give you some data. I'm going to be updating this posterior. Okay? So the first thing that I observe is this data point over here. Okay? And the thing that I showed you here is the posterior. Okay? This posterior is this number over here. Given that I have only observed this database, what is the probability for each one of the h's to be the true one? Okay? Under the assumption that I have a Gaussian management probability. So the first thing is, this is a function 3. Observing that from that function is impossible. Okay? But it could come from the other 3. Okay? It fits 2 better. So that's, it gives 45% of the probability to 2. But it could be 1 or 4. Okay? What does it mean that for my posterior? So now my posterior is, okay, I'm more comfortable with 2, but I could be in 4 or I could be in 1. Okay? That is the idea of the Bayesian learning. I'm not going to tell you now that the true position is this one. I'm going to give you this complex output probability. Okay? Now we're going to observe a second data point, which is here. And when I observe this one, what happens is all of the others go to 0. Actually, the second best is H2, which has a probability of 10 to the minus 7. So now only for see the second data point, these 2 data points can only be explained by the function form. So the output seems that it has big function form as given the output. Actually, there are some weights in here, but this is the peak of the distance. Okay. This is a cartoon to explain how Bayesian statistics work. And you're usually where you're going to find yourself when you do Bayesian statistics. In many cases, you're going to find yourself in this scenario, okay? In which you have to integrate out all the information that you have from your posterior, because that will give you the best prediction that you can. Okay? And that is the whole purpose of using a good prior for your model. Is that it might allow you to do good predictions before you've seen enough data to settle on the right cases. Okay? So Bayesian machine learning tend to be optimistic in the type of result that it gives you, while more frequent this approach tend to follow adversarial approaches in which they tend to be more pessimistic and they need more data to be sure about what they're doing. Okay? So that's one of the things that being Bayesian, and if you express your prior correctly, you're going to be able to make inference with less amount. Go from this Bayesian analysis, and the usually one of the problems that you have in Bayesian analysis is usually this P of H is not a set of continuous values, so it's a continuous one, and solving this thing might not be so. what is going to happen is this function might be very complicated. So when you come here and have to solve the integral, this integral becomes not easy to manage. Okay? So the complexity of many of the Bayesian algorithms is that you need to do sums to find this and to find P of t. And that becomes an issue in this case. Okay? So many of the advances in Bayesian learning end up being about how you compute these things. So you have all these approaches in Markov chain Monte Carlo or variational approximation in order to solve these things in a way, in a practice. So you end up having to define your model and having to define your approximation to those models and finding in order to find the solution. Okay? And now, just to go back to the previous result that we have in learning theory, is one thing that we could do is, instead of integrating it, just select the Bayesian matrices. Okay? So remember that here, I was computing this problem, and then integrating over here. Why don't I pick the best one and plug it up right here? Okay? If you do that, this is what is called the maximum posteriori. And actually, this is just finding the argument of the maximum for this. And then we predict the output as that. When you do this, you don't need to solve for this integral. And you don't need to solve for this integral. What makes your life much easier. Okay? And if you look at this equation is actually the same one that I have before. Okay? So if instead of just looking at this equation this way, just put a log in front and minus log in front, I will have minus log of the likelihood minus log of the time. Minus log of the likelihood becomes your empirical error. Minus log of the prior becomes your regularizer. Okay? So there is a connection between both of them, and it's basically saying, the connection is saying, do not focus on the full integral. Do not focus on the formula, just focus on the model. Okay? If you do this approach in here, both of them give you the same solution. Okay? And in many Bayesian models, the posterior tend to peaks, and hence, the maximum a posteriori might not be that far from the integrated solution. But in this solution, when you don't have enough data, the maximum a posteriori will tell you that the best solution is here, while the Bayesian model is going to tell you that the solution is actually always this solution. And if we just follow this model and take the maximum over here, we're going to be wrong, because this model is very far from this one. While when you do the integration of the full model, this one is still putting some probability mass in the truth. Okay. So the connection between what we were seeing before is just changing this integral for a maximum. Okay? Makes sense to everybody? Besides the maximum a posteriori that you have heard about it, then there is a maximum likelihood solution. The maximum likelihood solution, basically, you can see it as assuming a flat prior. There is no prior information, and it's the same thing as doing maximum likelihood. Okay? That's the whole idea of doing maximum likelihood. You typically do maximum likelihood when you know that the function h's that you are looking for is in a very limited set with respect to the data you have. So you know that your prior is not going to have any influence on the solution. Okay? Just think that you're doing linear regression in one day, and you have 20 data points. Okay? You actually don't need a prior. Okay. I'm going to leave this. So, let me go through this. The other thing that we could say, again, now I'm gonna complicate the problem a little bit more. Okay. So before I give you only 4 functions in order to explain one. Okay. Now I'm gonna give you a function of x that has some weights, yj and y0, and some power of x. Okay. I'm gonna assume the same model that I had before, a Gaussian likelihood, and I'm going to assume a Gaussian prior over here. So when I do this thing, I can compute the posterior of W and do the integration. Okay. In that case, when I do this thing, okay? When I want to compute the output for y star given x star, given the data, okay? The issue in here is the sum that I had before now becomes an integer. Okay? And that becoming an integral is, if this thing is not easy to work with, solving this integral is complete. So in many cases when you do Bayesian statistics, they talk about finding priors that are conjugate to the likelihood. So this posterior comes from the same family distribution of this one, and this integral is not. Okay? Sometimes those things don't happen, and you need to solve this integral either doing approximations, either sampling or variation. Okay. So you will hear a lot about those in the lectures. Okay? But the other thing that I wanted to show is that suddenly here, something that there are other parameters that appear that I didn't know about. Okay? So I have this P. How do I set P? I have sigma. How do I set this sigma? Okay? How is sigma W? Do I put this as a diagonal covariance, or is a full covariance? And if you're going to be full Bayesian about it, if W were your parameters, and we put a prior distribution over these parameters, these are parameters of the parameters. Typically we call it hyperparameters. Okay? So how do you do with this? You put another prior distribution over there. And that can go all the way to infinity. Okay? So at some point you have to stop being basic and set these parameters using your prior knowledge. Okay? This works because as you go higher in the hierarchy, the parameters that you set have less effect into the solution. Okay? And this is why typically these values you're going to set it by hand, or you're just going to put another parameters that are good enough. You will go to another hierarchy of the hierarchy of the hierarchy. Okay. But the idea of stopping have to be followed by whatever your primary knowledge is. And this is the point of this slide, which is you can do to the hyperparameters, this theta that we were talking about, the same thing that we did to it. Okay. So the same way that we integrated out W first, we can integrate theta out. Okay? Or what some other people will say is, let me just put the ML parameters in here, or put some other parameters that make sense for the data. Okay. But you stop at some point. Okay. So this is the only thing that I wanted to go through. Okay, now, there's one more thing.